31 years. That's how long Hoda Kotb had been doing this. 31 years of sitting across from the broken, the famous, the grieving, and the guarded. 31 years of finding the crack in the wall, the moment where a person stopped performing and started being. She had never once ended an interview early. Not once. Until the afternoon she walked into a sun-drenched living room in Montecito, California, and met a version of Meghan Markle that the cameras were never supposed to capture. What followed over the next 40 minutes would become one of the most quietly devastating moments in modern television journalism. No shouting, no tears, no dramatic revelation. Just two women, one microphone, and a silence so loud, it said everything. The living room had been arranged to perfection. Meghan's team had seen to that. The furniture placement, the lighting temperature, the angle of the chairs. Every detail had been approved in advance. Soft afternoon light filtered through tall windows, casting the kind of golden warmth that makes people look like they're already at peace. A vase of fresh flowers, carefully chosen throw pillows. The quiet elegance of a life curated for public consumption. Hoda had seen rooms like this before. Rooms that were designed not just to look beautiful, but to feel safe. Rooms built to lower defenses. She didn't question any of it. That wasn't her way. As the crew made their final adjustments, checking sound levels, repositioning softboxes, running cables along the baseboards, Hoda moved through the space with the easy confidence of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. She paused near the window, turned to Meghan, and offered the kind of sincere compliment that costs nothing and means everything. This space is beautiful. You've made a real home here. Meghan received the words with a smile that was perfectly shaped and somehow completely still. We've tried to create something meaningful, she said. Somewhere the children can feel grounded. Hoda nodded warmly. I understand that. My girls are my whole world, too. Something moved across Meghan's face in that moment. A flicker. Not warmth exactly. More like the recognition of warmth, processed from a careful distance. Hoda noticed it the way a seasoned sailor notices a shift in wind direction. Subtle. Important. Filed away. The cameras began to roll. Hoda settled into her rhythm. Body angled forward, expression open, energy deliberately receptive. Everything about her posture said, I am here for you. This is a safe space. Let's talk. She began, as she always did, with something gentle. So, Meghan, it's been quite a year. The brand launch, the movie cameo, Australia. A lot of moving pieces. How are you feeling about where things are? I feel centered, focused, clear about our direction. It was the answer of a press release. Polished, sealed, offering nothing. Hoda tried a different door. That's wonderful, but I'm curious about the emotional side. Not the public narrative. The private reality. How are you actually doing? I'm doing well. We're doing well. Hoda held the pause for just a beat longer than comfortable. Well covers a lot of territory. Can you give me something more specific? I'm not sure what you're looking for. And there it was, the first brick in the wall. Hoda leaned in gently. She'd dismantled walls like this before. She knew the technique. Patience, empathy, the quiet insistence that real conversation was possible if both people were willing. Something real, she said softly. Something personal. I've been doing this for 30 years, Meghan. The best conversations happen when people share what's actually going on. Not what they think they should say. The smile didn't waver. The eyes didn't soften. I'm sharing what's actually going on. I'm well. That's the truth. Behind the cameras, the crew exchanged the briefest of glances. Something was already different about this one. Something in the air. Not hostile, not yet, but compressed. Like the pressure before a storm that hasn't decided whether to break. Hoda moved on. She always moved on. There were other doors to try. The Australia Wellness Retreat had generated headlines. $3,000 for a weekend in Meghan's presence. An intimate gathering built around the promise of access, healing, and connection with someone who had positioned herself as a guide through exactly those things. And then, partway through the weekend, Meghan had left. A rugby match. A prior commitment. A scheduling reality that her participants had not been warned about. Some had called it transformative. Others had called it something else entirely. Hoda raised it plainly, without malice, the way a journalist raises a matter of public record. Some participants expressed disappointment. You left partway through for the match. Do you understand their perspective? I understand that perspectives vary. That's diplomatic, Hoda said, her voice carrying something measured and precise. But it's evasive. When someone pays a premium for access and receives less than expected, there's a reasonable basis for frustration. Do you acknowledge that? I acknowledge that not everyone will be satisfied with every experience. That's simply reality. It's reality, yes. But it's also something you could address. A refund, a follow-up, something to show you heard their concerns. Meghan's smile had begun its slow transformation. No longer warm, not quite cold. Something in between, the expression of someone calculating responses rather than feeling them. I don't believe I need to justify my schedule to anyone. Hoda didn't raise her voice. She never raised her voice. I'm not asking you to justify. I'm asking if you care about people who feel let down by you. That's a different question. I care deeply about everyone who supports our work. Then why not show it? The room held its breath. I think my work speaks for itself. Does it? Hoda said quietly. Because right now, your work seems to be generating more questions than answers. There are certain subjects that public figures learn to navigate with practiced grace. The art of the non-answer, delivered with such warmth and apparent candor that the questioner almost doesn't notice they've been handed nothing. Hoda had been watching professionals execute this maneuver for 3 decades. She recognized it immediately when the subject of Netflix arose. The partnership that had once been announced with fanfare, a landmark deal, a major platform, a new chapter, had ended. The show had not been renewed. The collaboration had quietly dissolved, leaving behind questions that had never been fully addressed. The Netflix situation, Hoda said calmly. The partnership ended. Your show wasn't renewed. What's your understanding of what happened? Partnerships have natural life cycles. That sounds like a prepared response. What actually happened? What actually happened is that we're taking the brand in a new direction. Independent. Controlled by us. But that wasn't the original plan, was it? The original plan was Netflix as a long-term partner. Plans evolve when circumstances change. What circumstances changed? Meghan's jaw tightened, barely perceptible, but there. A muscle memory of suppression. Business conversations aren't appropriate for this setting. Hoda's tone remained even, reasonable, almost gentle. You invited me into your home specifically to discuss your life and work. The Netflix situation is part of your work. Why wouldn't it be appropriate? It involves confidential business matters. The cancellation was public. The partnership ending was public. I'm asking for your perspective on publicly known information. My perspective is that we're moving forward. Moving forward toward what? Silence. Not a thoughtful silence. Not the silence of someone gathering their words. A closed silence. A door that had been quietly, firmly shut. Meghan reached for her water glass. Took a slow, deliberate sip. Set it back down with the careful precision of someone buying time. New opportunities. Can you name one? When there are announcements, there will be announcements. Hoda held the moment. Let it sit. Then, with the quiet certainty of someone who had watched this particular dance too many times to be fooled by it, she spoke. That's been the response for a while now. At what point do upcoming announcements become there aren't any announcements? A lesser interviewer might have doubled down, pressed harder, gone for the confrontational kill. Hoda did something far more revealing. She stopped. She set aside the professional question, the accountability question, the carefully documented public record, and she simply asked Meghan Markle what made her happy. It was the oldest technique in the book, the human pivot. The moment where the journalist sets down the clipboard and becomes a person again, reaching across the table to find the person on the other side. Forget the business for a moment, Hoda said softly. Tell me something that brought you genuine pleasure recently. Something small and personal. Meghan paused, just slightly too long. I find pleasure in meaningful work. That's a category, not an experience, Hoda said. I'm asking about something specific. A moment. A memory. Something that made you actually smile. Another pause. My children bring me great joy. Hoda smiled. The real kind, the kind that reaches the eyes. Wonderful. Tell me about something one of them did recently that delighted you. The pause that followed was different from the others. It was longer, heavier. It had weight. Those moments are private. And there, in that answer, something shifted for Hoda. Not anger, not frustration, something closer to sadness. She tried one more time. I'm not asking for state secrets. I'm asking for a cute anecdote. Every parent has dozens of them. She laughed quietly, leaning forward. My daughter Hope says the wildest things. Just yesterday, she asked me why we can't see air. She let the warmth of the story settle in the room like an offering. What has Archie or Lilibet done that surprised you? I don't share specific details about my children publicly. What happened next was the kind of moment that veteran journalists live for. Not because it's dramatic, but because it is true. Hoda's voice remained kind, but her words became precise. You've shared quite a lot about them in other contexts. In the documentary, in interviews, you've discussed their lives, their challenges, your choices for them. But I asked for one funny story, and suddenly they're off limits. She paused. Consistency isn't always possible in public life, Meghan said. Consistency is exactly what's possible, Hoda replied. You choose what to share based on what serves you at the moment. When discussion benefits your narrative, you share. When it doesn't, suddenly privacy matters. That's not consistency. That's convenience. The color that rose in Meghan's face was not embarrassment. It was something closer to fury, carefully contained. I don't appreciate the implication. What implication? I'm observing a pattern. Selective transparency isn't actually transparency. In 31 years of broadcasting, Hoda Kotb had asked about spouses hundreds of times. It was standard, natural, the kind of question that flows like water through any lifestyle interview. How's Harry? 3 words. Simple. Human. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. I'd prefer to keep this conversation focused on myself. Hoda tilted her head slightly. But Harry is central to everything you do. The foundation, the public identity, the projects. Excluding him doesn't make sense. It makes sense to me. Then explain it. Help me understand why asking about your husband is off limits. Because he has his own identity. As do I. You've presented yourselves as inseparable partners for years. Harry and Meghan. Everything linked, everything shared. Now you want to be discussed separately. I want to be seen as a complete person. I see you as a complete person, Hoda said carefully. I also see you as someone who's married to Prince Harry. Asking how he's doing is basic human courtesy, not an invasion. What came next surprised everyone in the room. There are persistent rumors I'd rather not feed. What rumors? About our marriage. Its status. Hoda raised an eyebrow, just slightly. A micro-expression that carried the weight of 30 years of professional observation. I asked how he's doing. You heard a question about divorce. That's telling. I heard nothing. I'm being proactive. You're being defensive about something I didn't raise. That's different from proactive. Meghan began to rise from her chair. A reflex, not a decision. She caught herself, sat back down with the careful, deliberate movement of someone fighting their own instincts. Our marriage is strong. Then describe it, Hoda said simply. What do you love most about your life together right now? Silence. What did you do together last weekend? More silence. Meghan. You're claiming a strong marriage, but you can't tell me a single thing you enjoy doing together. I'm maintaining appropriate boundaries. And that was the word that opened everything. Boundaries, Hoda repeated quietly. Boundaries you've crossed repeatedly in other contexts. You've discussed your relationship on Netflix. You've detailed private conversations in the documentary. Your husband wrote an entire book about intimate family matters. But I asked what you did last weekend, and suddenly boundaries are sacred. Different contexts require different approaches. Or the same person applies different rules depending on what benefits her at the moment. That's offensive. It's accurate. And I say it not to offend you. I say it because I've been watching this pattern for years. The air between them had become something almost physical. Charged. Dense. The kind of atmosphere that makes rooms feel smaller than they are. Transparency when it helps the narrative. Walls when it doesn't. You can't have it both ways. I can conduct myself however I choose. You can, Hoda agreed. But you can't conduct yourself inconsistently, and then act wounded when people notice. What happened next was the most unscripted moment of the afternoon. The mask fell. Not dramatically. Not in the way of movie scenes and melodrama. But in the way that real things fall. Suddenly, quietly, with the terrible simplicity of something that can no longer hold its shape. You have no idea what I've been through. The words came from somewhere deeper than the afternoon's careful management. Somewhere raw. Somewhere real. Hoda didn't look away. I have some idea, she said softly. You've told the world in great detail, many times over. I've listened to all of it. She paused. Let the weight of what she was about to say settle into the room like a stone into still water. And here's what I notice. You've shared your suffering extensively. What you haven't shared is your growth, your recovery, your peace. You talk about healing, but you behave like someone still in crisis. My healing is my business. Your public advocacy is everyone's business. You've positioned yourself as a mental health champion, someone who's done the work, found the path. She held Meghan's gaze with the steady compassion of someone who was not angry, but was completely, unwaveringly honest. But sitting here with you, I see someone who can't answer basic questions without becoming defensive, who can't share a moment of genuine joy, who treats every interaction as potentially hostile. That's not healing. That's presentation. Meghan reached for her phone. It was an unmistakable gesture. Deliberate. Loaded. She checked the screen with the careful casualness of someone making a point. How much longer is this? We're about 40 minutes in. We'd scheduled an hour. I think we've covered sufficient ground. We've barely scratched the surface. Your questions have been inappropriate. Hoda met this with the patience of someone who had been here before, not in this living room, but in this dynamic. The moment when the interview subject realizes the conversation has stopped serving them. Which one specifically? Meghan's mouth opened, closed. The jaw worked silently, searching for an answer that would hold. None came. You can't name one, Hoda said quietly. Because there wasn't one. I asked about your retreat, your Netflix situation, your marriage, your children, your happiness. Basic topics for a lifestyle interview. You treated each one like I was conducting a criminal investigation. Then came the moment that the crew would remember for years. Meghan's voice dropped to something low and deliberate. I think you should know that I'll be discussing how I was treated here with my team. The room went very still. Hoda Kotb, 31 years, tens of thousands of interviews, presidents and survivors and kings and first responders, leaned back slightly in her chair. Is that meant to intimidate me? It's meant to inform you. Then consider me informed. A beat. And let me inform you of something in return. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I've been in this business for 3 decades. I've interviewed presidents and survivors, and people whose circumstances would make yours look comfortable. I've never been cowed by the promise of a publicist's angry phone call. She looked directly at Meghan. And I won't start now. When Meghan Markle stood up from her chair and announced that they should not continue, she expected, perhaps, that the interviewer across from her would backtrack. Soften, find a conciliatory tone, and attempt to salvage what remained of the scheduled hour. That was not what happened. Hoda Kotb nodded calmly. I agree, she said, but not for the reason you think. Meghan's composure fractured at the edges. What does that mean? It means I'm ending this interview. Not because you're uncomfortable. Discomfort is part of genuine conversation. I'm ending it because the way you've conducted yourself makes continued engagement impossible. The way I've conducted myself. Defensive from the first question. Dismissive of legitimate inquiries. Implicitly threatening when challenged. That's not how a guest behaves in someone's professional space, not even when that space happens to be her own living room. What came across Meghan's face in that moment was something the cameras captured in full. Not anger, exactly. Not sadness. Shock. The genuine, unguarded shock of someone who had walked into a room expecting a particular kind of conversation and had found something she'd never encountered before. An interviewer who simply would not bend. In 31 years, Hoda said, I've never done this. I've sat with people in far more difficult circumstances who managed basic courtesy, who could acknowledge questions even if they couldn't answer them fully, who understood that an interview is an exchange, not a one-way broadcast they control. She paused, just for a breath. I've been perfectly courteous, Meghan said. You've been perfectly controlled. Those aren't the same thing. Meghan Markle left the room. Her footsteps echoed through the hallway. Quick, clipped, the sound of someone moving with purpose through a space they no longer wanted to occupy. Murmured voices from the corridor. Her publicist. Then the distant, definitive sound of a door closing. And then, silence. The crew stood frozen, the way crews stand when something happens that isn't in the run sheet. Cameras still rolling. Sound still recording. Nobody quite sure what the protocol was for this particular moment, because this particular moment had never happened before. Hoda sat quietly in her chair. She didn't move immediately. She sat the way someone sits after something important has ended, not in grief, not in triumph, but in the particular stillness of a person processing something true. "Let's take a few minutes," she said finally. Her voice was calm, steady. "Then I'll do a direct-to-camera piece addressing what happened." The crew nodded. Someone switched on a single standing light. Someone else quietly cleared a path to the lens. And when Hoda Kotb was ready, she turned to face the camera directly. No notes, no script, no carefully approved talking points. Just a journalist. And the truth. "What you just witnessed was not what I planned for today." She paused. Let the weight of the afternoon settle into the room one final time. "I came to this home expecting to have a meaningful conversation with Meghan Markle. What I encountered was something very different." She spoke carefully, precisely. The way someone speaks when they want every word to carry exactly its intended meaning and not one syllable more. Every question I asked was met with resistance. Topics that should have been simple, her recent trip, her work, her family, became battlegrounds. When I asked what makes her happy, she couldn't answer specifically. When I asked about her children, she claimed privacy, despite extensive prior public discussion. When I asked about her husband, she deflected by raising divorce rumors I hadn't mentioned. She took a slow breath. At one point, she implied my questions were inappropriate and suggested her team would be discussing how she was treated. That's a veiled threat, and threats have no place in honest journalism. Her voice did not waver. It never wavered. "I've given 31 years to this profession. I've built my reputation on empathy and genuine connection. I will not be intimidated by someone who confuses fair questioning with persecution." She looked into the lens the way she had looked at 1,000 faces over 3 decades, directly, humanely, without flinching. "I want to be clear about something. I came here with good intentions. I wanted to understand Meghan's perspective. I wanted to give her a platform to share her truth, her growth, her vision. She made that impossible. Every bridge I tried to build, she burned. Every door I opened, she slammed. The Meghan Markle who sat across from me today is not the person her public relations presents. That person would be warm, open, genuine. What I encountered was guarded, hostile, and ultimately disrespectful, not just to me, but to the viewers who deserve honest engagement." She straightened slightly, set her shoulders. "To anyone who watches this and thinks I was too hard." I asked about her wellness retreat, her Netflix project, her marriage, her children, and her happiness. Those are the friendliest questions a journalist can ask someone promoting a lifestyle brand. A beat. She couldn't engage with any of them. That's not my failure. In the days that followed, the footage would travel far and fast. It always does, when something real happens in a room that was designed to prevent exactly that. For Hoda Kotb, the afternoon became an unexpected marker. Not a low point, not a controversy, something closer to confirmation that 31 years of empathy hadn't dulled her edges, that the same instinct which had made her one of television's most trusted interviewers could also tell her, with quiet certainty, when a conversation had stopped being honest. She had extended her hand across that carefully arranged living room. She had offered warmth, humor, patience, and the accumulated wisdom of 3 decades spent genuinely listening to people. And she had learned, in 40 minutes, that none of it was enough. For Meghan Markle, the afternoon would be framed differently by different audiences. Her team would have their version. The tabloids would have theirs. The public would debate, as the public always does, who had been reasonable and who had been unreasonable, who had been fair and who had been hostile. But the footage existed, and footage has a way of outlasting all the framing in the world. Because what the cameras had captured wasn't a villain and a victim. It wasn't an ambush or a retaliation. It was something far simpler and far more revealing. It was a woman who had built an identity around the language of openness, of healing, of authenticity, of showing up, sitting across from an interviewer who asked her to do exactly that, and discovering she couldn't. Some interviews create connection. Others reveal its impossibility. The sun had moved by the time the crew packed up their equipment in that Montecito living room. The golden afternoon light that had been so carefully arranged for the interview had deepened into something cooler, longer, the kind of late-day shadow that makes even beautiful spaces feel a little hollow. Someone folded the throw blanket on the arm of Meghan's chair. Someone coiled the cables. Someone switched off the last of the softboxes. And the room that had been prepared with such care. Every pillow chosen, every surface arranged, every angle approved, returned to being just a room. Hoda Kotb had come with warmth. Meghan had brought winter. And when the cameras finally stopped rolling, only one of them seemed to fully understand what had been lost in that room. Not just an interview, but an opportunity. The opportunity to be seen clearly and to choose to be known rather than managed. Somewhere between the first question and the closing door, the gap between brand and reality had never been more visible. And no amount of spin, no team of publicists, no carefully worded statement issued hours later could close it. Because the cameras had been rolling. And the viewers, just as Hoda had said, quietly and without triumph, in the final seconds before Meghan walked away, would draw their own conclusions. They always do. 31 years. Never happened before.